Hello everyone. It may seem like I'm knocking these videos out in rapid fire. I am, because I have the time right now, and I don't know when I'm going to have the time next time either. I also have a lot of ideas that I've been working on for a while, and I want to get them out before I let them go. This video is going to be a video on what it's like to put yourself in the shoes of someone with borderline personality disorder. And I'm going to try to explain this sort of hypothetical in a way that links many of the symptoms of borderline personality disorder as I have suffered from it. In a way that is actually fairly personal in that I have synesthesia. And so in my form of synesthesia, I see what I feel and I hear what I feel. And because everything is funneled through feeling, I also happen to feel what I see and feel what I hear. And in that roundabout fashion where I feel what I see and I hear what I feel, I see what I hear and I hear what I see. It's confusing and really messed up, but one of the benefits of it is that not benefit. It's caused me a lot of trauma, too, but it causes me to process what I'm feeling in a more visual way, in an auditorial way, in which my mind creates the most pure representation of my feelings at any given moment as I embrace them. So, some of this is actually based upon how I personally feel, and what I've personally seen and experienced in my own life. And so this is still going to be a very personal video. So let's get right into it. Okay. So you don't have any clue what it's like to go through borderline personality disorder, we'll say. Or you don't have any clue whether you have it or not. You maybe heard that you have it, which I wouldn't put a lot of faith in that one. Or you've been struggling with symptoms for a long time and somehow managed to find it. And that one may actually have some more merit to it, but should not be exclusively what you use in order to determine that you have it. But this could help you as well. Where do we start? Well, here's how I'm going to start it. Imagine, and for those of you who work better imagining to close their eyes, feel free. This is more of a podcast than it is a photo or video representation. I just only use YouTube as a social media, so this is how it's coming out. So feel free to close your eyes at this point. Imagine that you are strapped to a chair. you're adult, 20s, maybe even 30s or later. Um, but you're strapped to this chair with a television screen in front of you. And on this television screen, you are seeing and hearing. This is going to be a very disturbing image, but very accurate, especially as it plays out. So, this is what it's like for some people. It's definitely a good representation of what I've went through. Imagine that on that television screen you are seeing and hearing an infant, no more than a few months old, being methodically, cruelly tortured in whatever ways could cause an infant the most pain without actually killing them. And you can close your eyes, but that doesn't stop you from hearing what's going on. And you're just stuck there. And you can try to block it out, you can try to remove yourself from what's going on, but it's the intensity of it is so great that it's impossible to completely block out. And um and you're just stuck there watching this torture of an innocent infant endlessly. And for the sake of discussion, let's say you are forced to watch this continuously for a year. Now that would be incredibly traumatic in and of itself. But now you're finally sort of ready. Now, this is to explain how it feels. Remember, this is important to understand how it feels to be someone with borderline personality disorder. This is not necessarily what happened to them. For me, it was being left alone for the entire year I was 3 years old. That's what broke me. My mom was going to college, and my dad buried himself in work. And though I have two sisters, both of them were dealing with the major dysfunctions of the family environment by removing themselves as much as possible from it. So it left me alone for an entire year. That's why I kind of picked for a year. That's what you're forced to watch. That's what you're feeling. And as you watch this, what happens is you start to identify with the child, the fear, the pain, the anger, like you start to suffer with the child and you start to identify with them, but you're not them. You're watching this. As far as you know, this isn't even real. It's just it. It's so damaging. It becomes overpowering and consuming. Um, And then, let's say for whatever reason, now it's over. And now you're unstrapped from the chair and it's time to go out and live again. You got rescued or something, I don't know. And you're out in the world, and it's like no one even acknowledges what happened to that child. It's like no one acknowledges what you went through being strapped to that chair, forced to watch that and listen to that. And people say things that are just so hurtful that take you back to that kind of experience. And um, every time you try to explain this to people, or you try to convince them that this is not a good way to be, um, they end up blaming you. Or worse yet, sometimes what it actually feels like is that they're blaming the infant. You'll see where I'm going with this in a little bit. And it makes you feel endlessly sad and angry and frustrated and disappointed and a whole ton of very strong emotions. And it's like the entire world is turning its back on you and that child, that poor child that no one seems to be talking about. Nobody seems to even care. And you, at some point or another, you start to you think you found someone who does care, um, enough that they aren't going to abandon you like everyone else has, and you start to trust them, in a way that causes you to think, um, maybe not causes you to think. It causes you to realize that you might finally be able to face this with their help. You might finally be able to start healing from this and whatnot. And best way I can explain it, what you'd blocked out before because you were not strong enough to face, you start to face it. And the sort of like a limiter in your mind is like a blockade, like a wall in your mind, um, finally breaks down. This is kind of your dissociative disorder, um, that was put there to protect you from the horrible truth that otherwise would absolutely have crippled you to death just so you could survive. This starts to break down, and you realize something you'd put as much distance between as you could. You realize that infant in that video that you were watching, that you were forced to watch, that was you. You were the infant that got tortured like that. And with this comes an enormous flood of emotions. It opens up this huge reservoir. It's now these emotions that were overpowering enough as they were are like 1,000 times what they were before, and it creates this regressive. You might actually be getting better, but it's not going to look like that from the outside. From the outside, it's going to look like you are falling the fuck apart. Oops. Um, Hopefully, YouTube can um, allow this video, despite a little profanity there. Um, but yeah, you're falling apart. You are getting better. You have progressed from not being able to deal with it to being able to deal with it, and your mind has realized this, and now it's time to face what really happened. And now you're so messed up. But it gets worse because the person you trusted to be there, to not leave you like everyone else, upon seeing this, is probably going to leave you. It's going to freak them the hell out, and they're gone, just like everyone else, proving that the people that you thought you could trust the most couldn't be trusted at all. Just like probably the same people that instilled this great sense of abandonment in you to begin with. Usually starts in the family. Usually very young. You know, when they're supposed to be your caregivers and they just weren't being good caregivers. Now, borderline personality disorder doesn't just deal with abandonment. It is caused by feelings of abandonment. It's very, very important to remember this. Feelings. It's not so important what a person has gone through as the feelings attached to it, because it's the feelings that that person is going to be struggling with, that they're going to have to be combating, dealing with, threatened by for so long. It's not that I was tortured as an infant, but I felt that kind of hurt, that same kind of hurt that you can imagine feeling, being stuck with that visual representation. For me, it was an infant being tossed in a dumpster and then having this horrible thunderstorm almost immediately hit that infant in this dumpster, and then this garbage truck comes and it picks that infant up in that dumpster and dumps them in the back of that truck, at which point I fell into like an endless black, and I eventually would feel as though I'd hit the bottom of a giant pit, like the floor, and the pain of being there and feeling so alone, and the post-traumatic stress I experienced from various acts of abuse over the course of my childhood would be triggered by that pain, and it was as though the bottom of that pit that I had suddenly hit crumbled at that point, and I began to fall again and hit bottom again and again and again and again and again. And this would go on for hours. Hours I would be curled up in this fetal position, unable to tell who I was or where I was or any of that. And I had to have the every light going on around me that I could, just to try to have something to between these moments of vastly debilitating symptoms where one thing would cause the other, which would cause the next, and back to the first. This chain reaction to try to break that up somehow. And this would be pretty typical experience. Like this could go on for 10, 12 hours and every day for weeks for me. At a certain point, much like watching that video of that infant being tortured, the feelings are more traumatic than what is actually happening. I mean, you think about it, if you watch that video for an entire year, it probably wouldn't be like an entire year's worth of 24/7 torture. It would be a little bit of torture on a loop. Like a few hours of torture or a few minutes of torture on a loop. And that's how it feels. It just feels like you're stuck in that emotional state on that little bit of trauma, whatever it was, it hit you in such a way, you broke in such a way that the feelings became the trauma rather than the trauma itself, which may have been vast or it may have been quite small. The feelings became the most traumatic part of the experience. So but now you know you're the infant that was tortured that you were watching. And it messes you up, seriously. I mean, it really messes you up. But here's where we start to define this disorder as a personality disorder. I tell people what makes a personality disorder what it is it takes so much to fight it, to it governs your actions. It defines you as a person. These experiences, they're so intense and they're so consuming, and it takes so much to deal with them, however you choose to deal with them, whether it's to hide from them, to pretend that they don't exist, to try to run from them and just go the opposite way in hopes that it will make things better, and or to try to demonize them. I did like I did myself. I've been here, and every single one of those things I just listed, been there. But I chose to demonize it. And I chose to fight it more than anything else, because I truly believed that it was that I was a monster for it, and that I needed to overcome it, or at the very least, that I was obligated to suppress it because other people just could not deal with what I was dealing with, not even for a moment, let alone the constant exposure and everything that people say can trigger it. It's like people trying to talk to you about sports or something, and you're like, I'm not really into sports, and that's fine. But some people, a lot of people, are like, what do you mean you're not into sports? Why are you not into sports? And you're like, and I mean, like in my case, the reason why I'm not into sports is because um, my dad was never around it, or when he was around, he'd watch a lot of football, and it felt like sports became an excuse for the little time that we had together, for us not to spend time together. When I got old enough, I could actually do sports. Um, I had multiple experiences where, being right-handed and left-eyed, I couldn't shoot worth crap, and people would treat me bad because of that. Or when I would, because of my years in martial arts, when I would do baseball, I would hit the ball way better if I swung the bat like a sword, which I kept down, versus like